I'm Barbara O Meara and I'm a visual artist and a writer, and I've been involved in the Stay With Me show. I've been painting for about 35 years, and all my work is informed by my own family history of trauma and loss and grief. So I would always put the fragility of life into the work and some healing. And I also trained as a community artist. So in the last 5 years, I've done 5 projects with community work. The first project was Children of 1916, where I reimagined the lives of the children who were killed in 1916. Researched how they lived, the poverty and the oppression, and I painted them. And it was a healing process for the children. And then from that was with the Five Lamps Arts Festival. From that, I did a new body of work called Born Babies of Ravaged Nations, where I took work from inspired by incidents that I saw on television or read in the paper. The start of it actually was twin baby boys of 5 months that were blown up in Syria, and I was sitting on a Sunday morning having my breakfast reading the paper, and this came up in the news, and I just was so emotional and overwhelmed that I decided I was going to use these stories to do paintings. The paintings are all anonymous, but it was called Born Babies of Ravaged Nations.
At the same time, the story of the Tuam Babies burial scandal in Galway emerged, and Barbara felt she wanted to be involved.
So when the exhibition was coming to hang in the Point Depot with the Five Lamps Arts Festival, I decided I would include a small baby blanket, and I asked some women to knit squares. We had 8 squares, and they all said yes, and the squares all came back to me within 2 weeks, and we hung a little textile blanket to honour the Tuam Babies. And from that I realised that there was a need for women of Ireland to express their empathy with the families and survivors from Tuam, to express their grief for the babies. So I set up the project Stitched with Love, which took a year to make the blanket. I put an open call on Facebook for women of Ireland to knit a baby square, and we got 796 baby squares, and we made a blanket.
The Baby Blanket project took on a life force of its own, and hundreds of people wanted to get involved.
So the blanket was in 4 panels to represent the 4 provinces of Ireland. So that was brought to Tuam by myself, but a lot of people came. It was a Remembrance Day, and the survivors and relations of the babies carried the blanket onto the site and laid it out. And we also had a beautiful healing ceremony with Karen Ward of Moonmanaw. I had never been to the site. I had deliberately decided I wasn't going to the site until I brought the blanket to honour the babies. So when I stepped onto the site, I actually wanted to leave. I wanted to run away. The energy that I felt on the site was just overwhelming, and somebody had to sort of grab me and hold me. And it was very strange, because when we went to lay out the blanket, the wind just whipped up out of nowhere, and it was very, very difficult to actually put the 4 panels on the ground. So hence, when you see images of the layout of the blanket, there's a huge space between them. And then as soon as we started the ceremony, the wind just dropped again. So it was a very strange energy. We had a beautiful ceremony. Women from all over Ireland who had knitted a square for a baby came. We had the Women's Network of Ireland. They came down in force on a bus, and it was just very, very moving and emotional.
Barbara herself knows the trauma of losing somebody, and she has experienced that helplessness.
30 years ago this year, we lost a family member tragically, an innocent victim of homicide. So a lot of my work would have been related to that trauma. So as a family, we're still grieving. There's no closure with that. The case was never solved. So we've been in a limbo state with that grief. So when I suppose I've always been interested in social justice, and my painting was my voice, really. I'm quite a shy person, an introverted person. So I would always, things would embed themselves in my heart and I would put them into the work. So that trauma is my trauma, but I sort of empathize with other people. I don't know how they're feeling, but I know how I'm feeling, and I can imagine what they might be going through. So I think that informs a lot of my work. I think as an artist as well, it's my job to bear witness to and highlight injustice. My work has to have meaning. It has to have some sort of purity and connection to humanity in it.
The story of the Tuam Babies and how children in care died in Ireland haunts people like Barbara, and she turns to art to express her feelings.
It's sort of unbelievable, really, and I think that was the energy and pain I felt. I mean, I think a lot of people have that intuition when you go into a very old building. You sort of know what sort of energy is in it, you can feel it, and that's what I felt on that land. And I suppose in a way they're a bit like me and my family were in limbo about what happened to us. The case was never solved, there was no solution, and these families are suffering and they're going through that. So for me, my loss was sudden, shocking, horrific, destroyed our family. Feel I have two lives. I have my life before and my life after. I think you can do a lot of work on yourself, and there is a lot of healing, but I think in the end you really just learn how to live with this trauma. It's very painful at times. Time does not mean anything. And also, I felt for a long time I was living with a secret. It sets you aside, and so you feel like an outsider a lot of the time, and you have this sort of barrier between you, and also there's a lack of trust with people as well. So you would have very heightened senses, and the trauma, I think, of horrific things happening to you, like losing a baby or, death by homicide. I think you just learn to live with it, really.
The baby blankets by the Stitched with Love community and coordinated by Barbara have now appeared at several powerful exhibitions across the country, including the Stay With Me art show. It's even travelled as far as Sarajevo, where it was held and folded by Bosnian survivors. This project means so much to Barbara.
And it was very important to me that each square was 8 inches by 8 inches. First of all, to represent the nearly 800 babies at Tuam, but also that this size square was something that could actually fit around a little baby. Because when I was growing up, if you heard somebody in your family or a neighbour was having a baby, you knitted. That was part of the culture. Irish women knitted and crocheted, and you knitted a gift for the baby, booties, a little matinee coat or a hat, and those babies probably did not get anything knitted for them. They did, maybe their mums did before they had them, but definitely the extended family, the neighbours, the relatives, that was all hidden. So just even to bring that back, that something beautiful was made for a baby, knitted with love and stitched with love.
Barbara believes she can express her honesty through her artwork.
I think truth really is very important to me, to live my life in truth and honesty. And I think that was something that was quite difficult growing up in Ireland in the 60s. As a child, you really didn't have a voice. Nobody was interested in you in school and whatever. You were just ignored. And I think really a lot of women were just expected to get married and have children and, you know, shut up and stay at home. And so I think I've always followed my own truth, and I think lived my life as truthfully as I could, even with my own daughters, like even discussing difficult things, trying to be honest with them, and letting them live in truth, letting them be who they are and not who I wanted them to be.
Barbara believes that art can play a huge role in helping to ease suffering.
I believe art is healing, and I think anything creative is healing, and I think it gives a voice to the voiceless. And I think art shown to people, especially on difficult subjects like the Tuam Babies, is a way that people can connect without feeling that it's a lecture or it's political, or people can sometimes get oversaturated with the stories, or it's like they know the stories so they sort of switch off. Whereas if you see a beautiful creation about a painful subject, that will stay with you.